Minister, I want to welcome you to the House again for this long overdue debate on the establishment of another tier in the Irish banking system. There's never been more reason for a regionally based, common good orientated and publicly mandated banking system. We need a banking system that we can trust. If there's one thing that we have learned from the crash and from the financial abuse and all of that, we need to be able to trust our banking system. Now, we saw, and I'm on the Finance Committee, so I suppose we deal with this on a very regular basis, but we saw how the tracker mortgage scandal has impacted on customers who themselves entered into mortgage contracts in good faith with the banks. And in my time on that committee, while dealing with this issue, I was continually struck by the absolute disconnect between the banks and their customers and the disrespect shown to them. We see this even in the numbers in terms of the reporting even to the central bank. There were, the numbers increased and increased all of the time. Trying to get the truth out of the banks within the Finance Committee is near impossible. And that is a serious problem that we have to address. Well, absolutely it is. I agree with you.
Every time you go in looking for something, can't do that.
But it's
true. Agreement.
But I'll say it for him. It's true. You go into the bank. No, actually, you got to come back between this time and this time to get your own money.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. And where you have people in rural areas, and this is why we're talking about a rural banking system here, where you're talking. I know it's for SMEs and that, but where you're talking of in a rural area where people have to travel miles with no public transport, they go into a bank and told that they come back, the next day or whatever. It's absolutely bizarre what's happening in the banking system here. And I suppose it's happening because it's been facilitated to happen. But I lost count of the amount of times we were given guarantees that customers who had been identified as being affected by the tracker mortgage scandal would no longer be contacted or indeed harassed by those same banks looking for the payments. Yet it continued in very many cases. So there's something seriously wrong with the model of banking that we have currently. On May the 2nd, my colleague Pearse Doherty asked the interdepartmental report on the public banking based on the Sparkazan model when it would be published. It has already been delayed by several months. Deputy Doherty was told that the report had been completed and it would be brought before the government in the next few weeks. So, Minister Naughton, I would ask you, as you sit at the Cabinet table, have you seen that report and when will it be publicly published? The current threat to more than 390 post offices brings the issue of public banking into sharper focus. The postmasters at these branches have either been offered a no-win situation, either they take the 2 years salary redundancy now, or they try as best they can to keep their branches viable. The current option being presented is that the post office network has to downsize and that branches left in larger towns should open themselves up to the pillar banks and offer their services. Now, Ulster Bank, AIB and Danske Bank are now being presented as the saviours of the small post offices. The community reason for discussing public banking, or the whole reason for discussing public banking, is that we desperately need another model which is not open to the greed and the incompetence that we saw those very same pillar banks destroy our economy. Why has the current offer to these postmasters been made? Surely, if the government was serious about setting up a second tier of banking, it would strive to keep these branches open. There is also a huge political will to get this done. I know the previous governor of the central bank was fully in favour of the second tier of banking. The current government has a commitment to seriously examine the issue in the programme for government. It's not as if we are venturing into an unknown here. There are many examples worldwide of public banking using or cooperating with existing structures such as the postal network and delivering a second-tier banking system. And indeed, I do want to commend and I want to welcome Noel Kinahan to the gallery here. I want to commend the work that has been done by Irish Rural Link on all of this. So it's not like looking at a blank sheet. The propositions have been put forward, the proposals have been put forward. We again had the German cohort into the Finance Committee. We will be travelling, and I hope to be part of that delegation to travel to Germany in September to have a closer look at the German banking system there and how we can look to replicate that model here as well. So there are lots of answers there. There are lots of actors involved in this. We just need, but it is the government's responsibility at the end of the day to have a banking system that meets the needs of its people. Public banking is not solely focused on commercial lending and on returns to its shareholders. It can play a huge role in lending to SMEs, which are still a major employer in rural Ireland. In Ireland, though, 90% of lending to SMEs is controlled by 2 banks. You know, we can't allow that to continue. We can't allow it to happen. We can't have that dependency on 2 pillar banks. The Post Office, which has a far greater presence in local communities compared to the pillar banks, could help re-establish the relationship between the borrower and the lender. And it's that relationship that you have. When you have a public community system like that, you have the relationship that was there before the banks got greedy and reckless and everything else, where you could go to your bank manager, you could go to the personnel within the bank, and you could discuss your needs and your plans with them. One of the things that has disappeared from the pillar of banks, is that, especially in rural areas, is that relationship between a bank manager and its customers. I hear that even from the farming community all of the time. There's nobody now that go in to understand farming and the issue of, you know, payments made or payments coming in at certain times and all of that. In many rural branches, you can no longer deal in cash, as Senator Norris said, collect foreign currency, or even set up an appointment with a member of staff. In North Dakota and in Germany, there are public banking systems in place. In Germany, it's been in place for, I think it's 200 years, and they have proven to be really successful. Notwithstanding the fact that North Dakota has only a population of, say, 750,000, $1 billion has been returned to the state in North Dakota, and that money is given back to citizens. You see, we have the situation here where the banks don't even have to pay corporation tax for decades. And then we have rural Ireland and the neglect of rural Ireland and that money that could be spent. So if you had that system, and that system being invested in rural Ireland, then we could have a whole different approach and a whole different outcome for our citizens. The New Zealand model we're looking at today was set up in 2002, and already it has 20% of the overall banking market on the island of 4.6 million people, a model which could be, again, replicated in this state. We heard from representatives of Kiwi Post Bank that the banking service was offered in order to break the back of the major Australian banks that held a huge market share in New Zealand. Yet they sent most of the profits back to Australia. The Post Office network needs something new. The public banking model holds the chance of keeping these branches open and giving customers a choice in banking. We have talked for a long time about how customers were mistreated by the banks, but I believe, and I'd finish on this, Caroline, I really believe it's time to allow them to vote with their money and their business and be allowed to embrace a new model of banking system which has proved successful in so many different countries and in New Zealand. I absolutely firmly believe in this. As a party, we've always believed in a public banking system, but after the crash and all of that, it is absolutely imperative. But the government are the only ones that can deliver on it and put impetus on it, making it happen.